begin with sorry, I think now it's working. Oh, why it did not work?
Yeah, it's working, sir.
No, I am not able to move the slides.
I think it was moving earlier.
Okay, good. Now it's fine, Jayaprakash?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, good. So to begin with, let's start like why we need a statistics, and then what are the methods of data collections and the types of data. What is the whole gamut of quantitative data analysis mostly being used in social science? Then the basics about the correlations and regressions. Then let's have a basic concepts of two variable linear model, an overview of time forecasting techniques, and then we'll come to the time series analysis. We'll have it a basics of decomposition techniques. Then we'll move to the autoregressive integrated moving average models, and then we would like to have a autoregressive conditional heteroscedasticity or generalized autoregressive conditional heteroscedastic model. And in the end, we would like to have illustrations using OHA. So this will be running from today and tomorrow. So tomorrow first session also we'll have. So there we'll have a kind of illustrations and some of the theories. As usual, in the first class, you have got a very detailed discussions on the statistics. My simple take is that there are many definitions, but the basic definitions and to a understanding to a layman's or any other persons is simple. It's a science which deals with collection, compilation, analysis, and interpretation of the data. Now, when it comes to the collection of the data, you can collect the data only by two means of the data. Two means, either through design of experiment or through sample survey. So you may be having there are different ways of, but when it comes to the collection of the data which has been collected, either you whether you have collected or your friends have collected or from Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation or NSSO or any other kind of data are being collected either through design of experiment or through sample survey. The moment I am saying of design of experiment or experimental design, what you say, so this, you see, the moment I am saying design of experiment, this means researcher is designing the experiment. This means experimenter has a complete control on this. So experimentation itself means you are trying to create a controlled condition, isn't it? So there can be two situations. Suppose if you are developing any variety and you want to test, suppose in terms of yield, suppose you are developing a variety which you believe that because of its genotype compositions, it is going to yield better than the existing variety. So you'd like to compare the developed variety with the existing variety. Now, when you try to compare the developed variety with the existing variety, you will ensure that other than the genetic makeup or genotype, no other factor should be influencing, no external factors. So we will try to minimize the external factors. Rather, what you are going to do is that you are going to create a controlled conditions so that the external factors, external variations should be as low as minimum as possible. So that the difference in the yield should be only because of the genotype, not because of the soil type, not because of the fertilizer dose, not because of any other package and practices. So how do you ensure the creation of control conditions is that as R.A. Fisher has given the three principles of experimental design. And what are those three principles are? Randomization, replications, and local control. So the randomization is simple. the manner you are allocating the treatment to the experimental units. So if you have a variety and you have a particular size of field, which is known as experimental units, and the like plots are experimental units, then you try to randomly allocate the treatments so that there should not be. Why are you doing so? You are doing so because a obvious question is that you want to have a objective comparison among the treatments. There should not be any subjectivity into that. And in turn, as a as part of a statistical assumptions, it ensures independence of the observations. So the randomizations ensure objective comparison for layman understanding, and as a part of ANOVA, it ensures independence of the observations. It's one of the assumptions of the ANOVA, and randomizations ensures that. Second is that second principles of design of experiment is the replications. This means the number of units to be provided for each of the treatments. Okay, so you can have replication 2, 3, 4, 5 kind of things. Why we are having replications, or what replication, how replication helps? It provides an estimate of the error variance. Remember, it provides the estimate, not it does not reduce the error variance per se. It provides an estimate of the error variance, which increases the accuracy of the estimates of the treatment effect. And the third principles of design of experiment is the local control or error control. So basically, non-random allocations of the grouping of the blocks in the blocks. So when you have a field, so homogeneous plots having a similar natures, they are being grouped in a particular blocking. What you do in a randomized block design, like randomized complete block design, RCBD or RBD, what you are saying, it increases the precision by choosing appropriate type of experimental units and because of their grouping. So the first way is that you try to collect your data through design of experiment, and through design of experiment, by using the principles of design of experiment like randomization, replication, and local control, you try to create the control conditions. By creating the control conditions, you try to minimize the external variations in order to create a level playing fields. So here, experimenter has a complete control on the researcher has a complete control on the experiments. So rather you are trying to generate or rather manufacture the data kind of thing. So without any and so we slowly, if you try to talk about the experimental design, you have a complete block design. When I say complete block design, means all treatments, suppose you have 5, 6, 7, they all will be in a block at least once. So only once. So you have got a CRD. Of course, CRD is a design where local or error control, there is no blocking as such in that. But randomized block design, Latin square design, so you have a complete block design. But you know, like when you are carrying out an animal experiment or anything, you know that you cannot ensure that that equal number of kind of things. So you have an incomplete block design, and then you talk of balanced incomplete block design, partially balanced incomplete block design, and in as a breeders, you try to talk of a lattice design, a square lattice design, and blah and blah. So I'm not going into the detail of it. My only purpose here is that if the data will be collected, one means of collecting the data is design of experiment or through experiment of design. And most of your breeders friends, agronomy friends, they will be talking about the design of experiment. Of course, we generally in social science deal with the non-experimental data, but of late, recent, if you would have if you remember that we have started talking of randomized control trials and all. So we have started doing the design experiment, but it is a costly affairs in case of that. So most of the times we deal with the non-experimental data. Now, when it comes to the non-experimental data, the kind of survey which you are doing, being an economics student, being a statistics student, being a kind of an extension student, mostly what happens is that the survey, when we are going to do, the population exists in its own way. We do not have any control on the population. When we reach to a village, we reach to a district, population exists in its own way. We do not have any control on the population. And then from that particular population, or I generally say target population, depending upon your target population, means depending upon the aims and objectives of your survey. You see, remember, there will be a population, but it always a target population. The target population is which is being defined by your objectives of the survey. So suppose if my objective is that I want to have an average height of the students of this training program. So this is my target population. Or if I want to have only average height of economics students, so only economics students of this training program is my target. Remember that depending upon the aims and objectives of your survey, the target population are defined. Once you have got a target population, then the purpose of sample survey is to collect data from a part of a population. You see, it's not that only part of the population, we are scattered over the whole population from a part of the population, and on the basis of that part of the population, you try to infer about the whole population. That's how you increase. That's why, suppose out of 10, if you are selecting 2 units, then each units represent, that is what is the weight. Each units represent the 5 observations. So you infer about the whole population on the basis of the part of the population. Here the challenge is that how to select that sample so that we can make a reliable estimate about the population. And we have to be very clear that what kind of statements we can make about the population. Because I needless to discuss in details, because this is not the topic, needless to discuss in the detail that you cannot carry out a study on for a particular district and you start talking about the whole state. So remember that what kind of statements you are going to make, that depends on the kind of sampling you have done and what is the population from which you have started drawing the random sample. Now, challenge here is that population exists in its own way. You do not have any control on the population, and you have to ensure that the sample should be, which we do not say representative, because then it will be a subjective sample. It is in our mind that sample should be representative. But had been the population homogeneous, we do not have any problem into it. Like in the case of a blood group, our blood is homogeneous. Even a single drop of blood is able to tell you the blood group. Had it been heterogeneous, again, you know the problems. So when it comes to the sampling techniques, it has got 2 types. One is probability sampling, or generally what we say as a random sampling. When you are trying to select the sample randomly, there is a probability mechanism, the probability distribution is attached to that. Each unit of the population has got some probability of being included in the sample, not the equal probability, some probability of being included in the sample. And on the other hand, you have got a non-probability sampling, which is known as a purposive sampling, which is known as a judgmental sampling. Now, remember, a common understanding among the students is probability sampling is similar to the random sampling. Fine. But another understanding is that always random sampling means equal probability sampling. No, you can have a random sampling where there is an unequal probability. You want also in some of the situation, you see, suppose in a district you are going and suppose there are 10 villages, some are large villages, some are small villages. If you want to go for a distribution of the food, naturally you would like to have that the village having the larger area should given a more food. If you want to estimate a production also, then you want that more samples should be from the larger area. So naturally you try to give a unequal probability of selection, and that is what is known as a varying probability. So the question is, whenever we try to talk of a sampling, you always try to talk about the probability or a random sampling and non-probability of a judgmental or a purposive sampling. Again, in a random sampling, you can have a equal probability sampling and you can have an unequal or a varying probability sampling. The question only is that why do we mostly try to have a probability sampling? Reason is that so that we can study the biases of our results as well as a standard error of the estimates which we are developing. At least we can say that how reliable are our estimates. Like we can have a confidence interval along with our estimates. Okay, I can go wrong with this. So that objectivity into it, that you are able to estimate the standard error of the estimates, like okay, like my the predictions will be going wrong in only this. So that kind of objectivity is not possible in case of a non-probability sampling, in case of a purposive sampling, or in case of a judgmental sampling. That's why we try to go for a probability sampling. Of course, I'm not going to talk about a simple random sampling, a stratified random sampling, cluster sampling, systematic sampling, 2-stage sampling, 3-stage sampling, multi-stage sampling, and all. But my purpose of this was just to say you that when it comes to the collection of the data, either you are collecting the data through design of experiment if you want to compare your product with all existing products where you want to have create a control condition, or you go by sample survey where population exists in no way, in own way, and you do not have any control on the population. Of course, if you try to enumerate each unit of the population, it is known as a census, as the the population census and all kind livestock census. But if you take a part of it and you try to infer about that, that's what is the sample survey. So these are the two means, and they are two established subject. And of course, I do expect that you should have a good understanding of at least sample survey. And if time permits, sometimes, and if some of you are interested, I'll certainly have a detailed lectures on it. Of course, once you collect the data, naturally you collect the data on certain variables. Variables can be any characteristic, any traits, any attributes, and all kind of, be it a attitude, be it a gender, be it a income, be it a consumption expenditures. So data can be variable can be qualitative in nature and quantitative in nature. Qualitative in nature like honesty, attitude, and all kind of things. Quantitative in nature again has got a discrete as well as a continuous. Why I'm talking of this is that because most of the times when you collect the data, you get the data of different scales. But when your treatment is there, you start treating all things in similar way. I have seen the people, they enter the data in a Stata and they try to calculate the averages of anything and everything, including the gender also. So you must know the data which you have collected, what is their scale. So the lowest scale is that when you collect data as a qualitative scale, that is known as a nominal or categorical, like on the basis of a gender. You see, male and female, you cannot order them that male is greater than female or female is greater than, but you can only categorize on this variable. Any population you can categorize on the basis of religion, you can categorize on the basis of gender, but you cannot say that this gender is better, greater than this, or this religion is better. So there is nothing like that. So a variable which is nominal in nature or categorical in nature, in the sense that on the basis of that variable only you can categorize those variables. And then more than that, you can, if you have a variable which can help you in categorization also, and it can also be ordered. Like if you go to any profession, you know that assistant professor is junior to the associate professor, is junior to the professor. So you know that there is a order into it, but you do not know the difference between the assistant and associate and executive. So it simply, the moment somebody is saying that I am assistant professor, or somebody is saying associate professor, you only understand that okay, he is senior to that, but does not convey that the distance between the two rank value is going to be equal. No, not necessary. Or in army or in defense and all kind of things. When you move to further, then what happens is that you can get difference can be having a meaning. Like when you have a suppose year 2007 and 2000. So you know that if somebody had passed in 2000 and somebody had passed in 2010, so he's 10 years senior to that. But in this case, you know that the ratio does not carry any meaning. 2007 by 2000. And this is the common mistakes which you generally do, is that similarly temperature, what you are saying is a kind of an interval scale. So if a temperature is 10 degree and 40 degree, you should not say that four times. Times cannot be like 4 times more than the 10 degree. You cannot say that. You can simply say that temperature of Delhi is 30 degree more than the Simla when it is a temperature is 10 degrees C and 40 degrees C. So it's not a kind of 4 times, because you know the ratio does not have a meaning, because there is no arbitrary 0 points is there. And the last scale, like the observations which height, weight, consumption expenditures and all kind of things, that is a ratio scale where you can have ordering also, you can have a distance difference also, you can have a ratio also. So depending upon what is your scale, suppose your scale is nominal, then you can only think of obtaining the frequency, you think of obtaining the percentage, how many percentage are of this religion, all kind of things. When you have an ordinal, you try to talk of median, you try to talk of rank and all kind of things. When you have an interval, you have certain value. When you have a ratio, yes, here is the things which you can do any parametric and non-parametric test. So remember why I deliberately putting it all kind of things is that most of the times I know that extension students are taking care of a scale of measurement, but remember that depending upon your variables, you need to talk about the techniques or the tools or which you are going to use. Because even if you talk of a correlations, as I said that we have two type of correlations, we'll be talking at least to mention two type. So remember the kind of a statistics which you are using, you must be aware about the kind of a skills which you are having. Now because I'm running like in between, you can always like if you have any questions, you can always fire that question. Now, so you have got the like a scale, deliberately I have included into it. Now comes the now since we are talking on a time series data, so now comes the types of data. What are the types of data you have? So you have data, one is a cross-sectional data. Cross-sectional data means data on one or more variable collected at a particular point of time, isn't it? Like you know, like NSSO survey and all, they are mostly a cross-sectional data. They are collected on a particular point of time. When you say that the population of a country, so it's not that they will be collecting on one day. They will be collecting on, of course, of several, but that is a reference point, each and a single point. That the study was done in 2020. So when you collect the data on one or more variable at a particular point of time, that is what is known as a cross-sectional data. So if I measure your height or you measure your weight of all the 10, this is a cross-sectional data. So NSSO data, what you are getting is a consumption expenditures or any all, those are all for a particular year, for a particular round. When I'm saying they are cross-sectional data. But when data is collected over time, that is a time series data, as simple as that. So if you collect the data daily, maybe it a price or weather reports, you collect the data weekly, you collect the data monthly, quarterly, annually, they are all the time series data collected over time. Now the third data which has come in a big way now is that you see the people earlier will be working on the cross-sectional data. Time series data, naturally now you have a kind of an abundance of time series data. Like when you go for a finance market, you have got in every seconds of share data, isn't it? So you have an abundance of the data. But when you talk of an annual data and all, still we have a shorter length of this time series data. So when you have a shorter length of time series data, or you have a kind of cross-sectional data, what we have like in recent times is that because of this computation facility, people have started pulling the data. Pulling the data when you are trying to mix both cross-sectional and the time series data. So a particular point of time, suppose you have a 10 estates data. If you have a 10 estates food grain production of, suppose food grain production of 10 major states of the country, that is what is a cross-sectional data. But if you have that a particular states, say Maharashtra, and if you have a food production of Maharashtra or food grain production of Maharashtra of last 10 years, that is what is a time series data. So 10 states data for a particular year is a cross-sectional data. When you have got a data for Maharashtra for a food grain production for last 10 years, that is what is the time series data. But if you have all 10 states for all 10 years, that is what is a pool data. When you are elements of both time series and cross-sectional are collected, you can have even 2 point of time. But I'm saying that suppose you have 2000 to 2020 food grain production of 10 major states. So this is what is a pool data. A particular type of data is also sometimes known as a panel data, longitudinal data, or macro panel data. Panel data, of course, a panel of members also, but as essentially in a statistics, a panel data is, it's a special type of pool data where the same cross sections are there. Like you maybe you would have heard of like when data sources you tell that ICRISAT or many other organizations are just a same set of family or same village, they are collecting the data over time. So that is what is a panel data, where is like which is surveyed over time, and you can very well see the changes in all kind of things. So whenever you have got the data, you try to talk about the quantitative data analysis. I'm not talking of qualitative data analysis either. So you start with the univariate analysis. The moment you get the data, the first thing is that, as I said, once you collect the data, you try to compile the data, and compilation means you start with the frequency distributions and you try to have a histogram by pie chart and all kind of things. So complete descriptions of the frequency tables, and then you start describing the data. The moment we meet each other, we start describing the data. So that what are those descriptives? Descriptives are nothing but the measures of central tendency and dispersal. So be it a mean median mode or be it a arithmetic mean, numeric mean, and so all details are there. Skewness cut. So what happens is that when you try to describe the data, whenever you try to do the analysis of the data, the first thing is try to calculate the descriptives of the data, which will help you in describing the data. Descriptives means you should have a measures of central tendency, be it a mean, median, mode, depending upon its suitability. Then have an measures of dispersals, be it a standard deviation, variance, or range quartile. And then third order moment, that is skewness, and fourth order moment, that is kurtosis. So if you have first 4 moments of any data set, you know anything and everything about the data. So whenever you try to deal with, be it a cross-sectional data, be it a time series data, whenever you deal with the data, the first and foremost thing is try to have a descriptives of the data. That is what is univariate analysis per se. Then the moment you have more than one variable data, you try to talk about the relationship kind of things, and you start talking about the correlations and regressions, and when you have a qualitative data, you start talking of a continuous. And if you have more than 2 or more than 2 variables, you start talking of a multivariate analysis, maybe cluster analysis, maybe principal component analysis, and all kind of things. You are factor analysis and all you are talking. And of course, whenever you try to have a statistical inference, you have testing of hypothesis as well as a theory of estimation and testing. So the moment you talk of bivariate data, you try to talk about the correlations and regressions. So why I am talking of correlations and regressions? Because there is a purpose here. In this context, we will be talking of autocorrelation and autoregressions. So whenever you try to study the relationship between 2 or more variables, the correlation and regression analysis is performed. Maybe you try to establish a relationship between consumption expenditure and disposable income, height and weight, number of year of education, all other things we try to talk about the correlation. So you as an economist, you know the supply side curves, you know you know the demand side curve, you know the supply side curves. So if you know all points are on this line, and it's a kind of a decreasing, so naturally a correlation is -1, and you know, like when they are scattered around the line, so it will never be perfect correlation, neither in minus or plus. And when there is a horizontal, there is no pattern into it, so there is no line, so then correlation is 0. When it is an increasing trend kind of, so you can see that. So first quadrants you are talking of, but it's a positive correlation. So when we try to talk about the correlations, we generally try to talk about 3 types of correlation. Simple correlation between 2 variables. If you try to find, which we generally say as a simple correlation, when you try to find the correlation between 2 variable, consumption expenditure, disposable income, height and weight, or any other kind of things. Since it has been given by Carl Pearson, it is also known as Carl Pearson coefficient of correlation. What is to be understood here is that it measures the degree of linear relationship. Whenever you try to talk about the correlations, when you are being asked to define the correlations, you define everything and every other thing. If you do not mention the word linear, this means it is not correct. So measures of intensity or degree, whatever you are saying, it measures the linear relationship between 2 variables. Okay, and that is what is a linear relationship is. So correlation 0 does not mean that, so there is a correlation between 2 variables is 0, does not mean that they are independent. No, it simply indicates there is the absence of linear relationship. They may be quadratic. So if 2 variables, correlation between any 2 variables are 0, you should not jump to the conclusion that they are independent. No. There are certain situations when they are independent, but in only you have to infer the next interpretation. What you say that the moment correlation is 0 or close to 0, you can say that there is an absence of linear relationship. Fine. Now, when you talk of a multiple correlation, this means correlation between one variable and a set of variables. This means you try to find out the correlation between yield of a crop, and yield of a crop depends on fertilizer dose, weather condition, fertility of soil, quality of seeds. So a yield, a variable and a set of variables, when you try to find out the correlation between these two, is known as a multiple correlations. Okay. And the third concept which we are going to talk about is the partial correlation. Partial correlation means, you see, when you try to find out the correlation between any two variable, and if suppose you have more than two variables, in case of two variables, there is no concept of a partial correlation. In order to define the partial correlation, you must have more than two variables. So suppose if you have three variables, then the correlation between any two variables, after eliminating the linear effect, because only linear effect we can eliminate, after eliminating the linear effect, or after controlling, while controlling the effect of the third variable, is known as partial correlation. So remember three things. One is simple correlation, one is multiple correlation, one is partial correlation. In partial correlation, it is a correlation between two variables. After controlling, you are controlling the effect of the third variable, or after you are controlling means you are eliminating the effect of the linear effect of the third variable. Besides that, we like always sometimes talk of, like as I said, in many of the cases you have only rank. So in that, when you have a rank, then you cannot find out the Karl Pearson coefficient of correlation. Most of the times I see that, you see, garbage in, garbage out is always there. If good part of is that you have got a software. Bad part is that it gives you, if you give it the data, you give the garbage, it will give you the garbage out. Remember, you have to understand it, that even if there are ranks, it is a number. So even if suppose you have got a nominal variables, and if you have put a numerical as gender as a 1, and I think male as a 1 and female as a 2, and if you have a set of these observations, they will find out the correlations. But remember, it does not carry any meaning. So you must understand that which technique should be used. So if there is a rank, then you can use the non-parametric. You see, like, remember, there is a difference between parametric test and non-parametric test. That correlation between the rank value is known as a Spearman scale. There are many other correlations. I'm not going to talk about this. But when I'm talking of correlations, I must give you that calculation of the correlation. Region is I am telling you now itself. I know many of you know the correlations. Region is I have to explain the concept of autocorrelation. That is a wonderful tools to understand non-stationary series, or why kind of. If you see, like, if suppose you have a 19 observations, if you have a 19 observations, and if you have a data 2 series, the data is nothing but a mileage and the price data of the fuel. And if you try to calculate the correlations between these two variables, mileage and the price, you know that what you do is that you take an average of the mile mean mileage, and you deviate from this. So you get a deviations of the mileage, you get the deviations of the price, then you square these deviations, you square the second deviation, and you take the cross product of this deviation. Now mean mileage, find, you sum over it and divide by the number of observations. Mean price, you sum over it, divide by them. Now when it comes to the standard deviation, you know, you can always calculate the standard deviation. It's nothing but the square root of the variance. And what is that square root of the variance? So it's nothing but what is the standard deviations or variance? You have a variable, you deviate it from its mean, square it, sum over it, divide by the and of course questions is when to divide by n and when to divide by n-1. So you divide it, because you are dividing it only because you see there is a concept of a population and sample, and there is also a concept of unbiasedness. We'll come to it if time permits. But now what I'm trying to say is that, okay, standard deviation, if you have to do it, so you have an observations, deviate it from the average of the observations, square it, sum over it, and divide by the number of observations. In this case, number of observations minus 1, you get a standard deviation of both the variables. Now the important terms for the correlation is the covariance. Covariance is nothing but the cross product of these two deviations, sum over it, divide by the n1 minus number of observations. You look at the covariance. Covariance is essentially the correlations, but correlation is nothing but the standardized covariance. Covariance has been standardized by dividing the standard deviation of both the variables. So in fact, covariance would have been the fine, but since as you increase the number of observations, it will increase. So in order to make it a unit free, and that's why it has got a unit free. You see, like its units gets cancelled, and remember that covariance divided by standard deviation of the two variables, covariance between two variables is going to be. So you have got a correlation. What is the point I want to explain here? That the sign of the correlation or sign of the regression coefficient is decided by the covariance. So even if both the regression coefficients are negative, the correlation coefficient, which is I know which is going to be the square root of the multiplications of this, will be positive, but I will take the negative sign because the sign is being decided by the covariance. Sign is not being decided. So if one of the regression coefficient negative, another has to be negative, and then correlation also has to be negative. So remember, the sign of these variables are being decided by the covariance, and this is how we are trying to find out the covariance and standardize that covariance by dividing the standard deviation. You get the correlation. Having said that, now try to understand, because you are trying to develop a model, you are trying to do the time series modeling and time series analysis kind of things. Let's understand what do you mean by model, isn't it? So far, so good?
Yes, sir.
Good. All is well, Jayaprakash?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. It's clear, sir.
Good. If you have any confusion, of course, it may be repetitions for many of you, but I am more interested for all rest 40. Anyone? Pavan Kumar, Alvira, and all, like, how is it going?
Yes, sir. Very good. We are understanding.
Okay, good. So when you try to develop a model, basically, in fact, map is again a model. A small photograph is in a model for, like, when you prototype of Taj Mahal is prepared, and when you go to Agra, you buy a Taj Mahal. Basically, you don't take the Taj Mahal from the Agra. You take only a photographs of that. So that is again a model, isn't it? And whenever any building is constructed, you develop a model. But in mathematics or in statistics, any equation or a set of equation which represents the behavior of a systems, like when you yesterday you would have talked of, so you have got an area equation, you have got a price equation, you have got a demand, you have supply, and all kind of things. So a single equation or a set of equation which represent the behavior of a system is known as a model. Simple. So if you talk of a two variable model, suppose y and x, maybe y is let us understand that y is a consumption expenditure, x is a disposable income. So y is a function of x. Now this function is like a mirror. It can be a linear, it can be non-linear, anything, but y is a function of x. Maybe y equal to x square, maybe y is equal to x cube, maybe y equal to x plus 2, y is equal to 2x plus 4, but it is a function of x. Y is a function of x. What is linear specification? Linear specification means y, or if you transform y, suppose take log of y, is a linear function of x or some transformation of x. If it is way, if you can express y or its transformation of y as a function of x or its some transformation, then it is a linear function. So that is how do you define the linear model? Linear model means when you can all the parameters. Remember parameters, when I'm saying parameters, we'll discuss more about this. Parameters refers to the population. P for parameter, P for population. Parameter refers to the population. So whenever you talk of a population, you talk of a parameters. Whenever you talk of a sample, you talk of a statistics, SSPP. So parameters refers to the population and statistics refers to the sample. So whenever you have a model, whenever you try to define the population, you will always talk about the parameters. Whenever you talk of a testing of this, it is always the parameter which you are testing. Remember, it is the parameter which you are testing. So all the parameters appear linearly, then it is a linear model. And if any of the parameters, remember parameters, I am not talking of variables. Remember, that's why y is equal to a plus bx. Here a and B, they are parameters. I'll talk a little more also. But y is equal to a plus bx plus cx square. Here a, b, c are linearly related. Here parameters are a, b, c, maybe. So quadratic equations are still linear in parameters, and that's why they are part of a linear model. Remember, they are part of, you see, linearity in parameter and linearity in variable. There are two things. Okay. So when I define linear model and non-linear model, linearity and non-linearity refers to the parameters, not to the variable, because you want to estimate the parameters. So we will take a partial differentiation with respect to the parameters. So if they are linearly defined, then it will be free from that parameters and it will not be complicated. If they are not linearly defined parameter, then the differentiation will not be free from that parameter, and that creates a problem. That makes it complex. So we do not bother about the variables. So remember, when we talk of a linearity or non-linearity, it refers to the parameters. Reason being is that when you are estimating the parameters, you are taking partial differentiation with respect to the parameters, not with respect to the variable. So non-linear model means at least one of the parameters appears non-linear. Mathematical models or a deterministic model means you are saying y equal to a plus bx. 2 plus 2 is 4. That's all. That is a mathematical model kind of thing. When you talk about a statistical model and a stochastic model, then you try to talk about the error. So 2 plus 2 is 4 for a mathematician. But if you ask a statistician, they will say 2 plus 2 is 4 plus error terms. So we are never 100% sure about it. 99% mostly sure. So mathematical model is a deterministic model. You give the value of the parameters and the value, you get an exact value. That is deterministic model. And a statistical model is a kind of a stochastic model where you have got an error terms into it, which has got a specified probability distribution. Then you also would have heard of a mechanistic model. Mechanistic models is logistic model, Gompertz model, and all kind of things, where parameters have a biological meaning. Okay, this is a rate of growth, this is a ceiling value, and all kind of things. So when you go for this logistic model, Gompertz model, and all, they are mechanistic model. Parameters have a biological interpretation. And then one is this empirical model, like polynomial kind of a model, which is a kind of a black box. Parameters does not carry much meaning to you cannot interpret those parameters. So remember, when we are talking of there are many chats, but I think so far there is no question. If there is any questions, okay, I'll take questions. So when we talk of a model, so model is nothing but a developing in terms of in statistics, in terms of a mathematics, you are just simply trying to develop a relationship between two variables. That's all. Relationship, and that relationship can be a linear relationship, can be non-linear. So what is linear is simply that moment dependent variable, like the left hand side variable is also known as a dependent variable, like yield is a dependent variable, or consumption expenditure depends on the disposable. More the income, more is the consumption expenditure. So that's what is the dependent variable, and the right hand side variable is known as an independent variable. We'll talk again about it. So you can have a linear model and you can have a non-linear. Linearity and non-linearity refers to the parameters. Mathematical model, a statistical model, mechanistic models, and empirical model. Sorry. After 2-3 slides, I'll take your questions and then I'll go back. Hope my slides are visible now. Okay.
Sir, it's
Okay,
visible.
good. Okay. So just to understand the concept of these terms which I have used, let us have a two variable linear model. I have a quick look on it. That you see in household consumption expenditure, you know that the consumption expenditure increases as their disposable income increases. It is as simple as that. Of course, for other students are like in mostly in as a part of a statistics student or extension, mostly we are in like consumption. Disposable income is nothing but an income. Remember, economists are good in confusing you. So they write instead of income, they write disposable income, that is like take home salary kind of things. But don't worry about that. So it's something like an yield is a function of fertilizer dose, as simple as that. So, but not by, don't take it seriously, economics student, please. So not by, but the increase, like if your income increases by 1 rupee, it's not that whole 1 rupee you are encouraging in in your consumption action. First thing is that you would like to save something out of it, and there are other things. So this is propensity to consume, like marginal. So how will you like try to, suppose if you like if you as an economist you try to study it, then the first thing is that you try to specify the model. And what is the specification of the model is that you write that y, that is consumption expenditure, is a function of disposable income, that is as a x, and the function can be linear as well non-linear. Suppose let us assume a simple linear equation, a straight line equation. Then what you can write is that this y, which is consumption expenditure, has got intercept same autosomal consumptions plus some coefficients of disposable income. Remember here, y is a dependent variable, x is a independent variable, but in econometrics language, you generally say as a explanatory variable. We do not say as an independent variable. Now we have only one variable, but we can have more than one variable. And of course, statistically, they should be orthogonal and they should be independent, but you know that they are not the true independent. So here x is a explanatory value, and this beta 1 and beta 2, they are parameters. They are called parameters. Remember, this is a regression coefficient, and regression coefficient can be anything between minus infinity to infinity. But since this beta 2 in terms of an economics, it is a marginal propensity to consume. So generally, it is believed that it should be between 0 and 1. Now, having said that, and of course, this beta 1 is an intercept. You can go regression with an intercept only if this means even if there is a zero income, x is 0, then also you have some expenditure on consumption, and that is what is known as autosomal consumption. So you can run a regression with intercept, without intercept, depending upon your need. Remember, it's not always that whenever you try to run a regression, you always have to have intercept. No, not necessary. Like if you try to establish a relationship between consumption expenditure and disposable income, certainly you will have to have this intercept, because you want that even if there is no income, you should have an autosomal consumption. But suppose as simple as that, you are running a kind of a machine for producing a toys. Now, if you machine, you are running 1 hour, you have certain number of toys, 2 hours, certain number of toys, no hour, no. So in that case, you can have y equal to simply beta 2x. You do not have to have a intercept, because when your number of hours is 0, you will get a 0 output. As simple as that. So remember, regression running with intercept and without an intercept has a purpose. We over time we may talk about it, and these are all kind of things. And as I said, that if I would have been a statistician, like I do not have any interaction to the economics student, then I would not have put a kind of this assumptions, which is nothing but a marginal propensity to consume, MPC, which is going to be between 0 and 1. This means if my income increases by 1 rupee, I will at the most will be expending 1 rupee out of it, not more than that. Of course, there are exceptions. So when you have this kind of a relationship, this means the moment you put a income, you should be able to calculate. Once you are able to estimate it, you are like then you should get a consumption expenditure. But you know that this exact relationship or a mathematical or deterministic relationship, which not going to describe adequately of any economic behavior. Because if you try to plot a scattered diagram, how do you try to identify the relationship? For identifying the relationship, the best thing is that you go for bivariate plot, a scatter plot. Even if you have a multivariate, you can go for a bivariate plots, and you can accordingly you can choose some of the variables as a linear, some of the variables as a quadratic, a cubic, and blah blah blah. So if you have a plot between consumption expenditure and disposable income, even if they are related, they are not going to be all on the one line. They are not going to be all on the one line. So naturally, they are deviating from this. Why? Because you all are students. You know that even if you two have got the same amount of fellowship, your disposable income will be changing. So because some of would like to cut their consumption expenditure and spend money on say entertainment or money on a study or any other kind of thing. So even if you have a equal income, you have got a consumption expenditure variation. So to take care of these variations, what you are going to do is that we are going to add the error terms, and that's why we are adding the error terms, and that's why we are making a mathematical model y is equal to beta 1 plus beta 2x as a statistical model or a stochastic model. And this error terms, this is what error is a stochastic variables with some specified probability distribution, not always the normal distributions, but generally to take it simple, we assume it as a normal distribution. With zero mean and constant value. So distribution is not specified, but mostly we will. So what is the purpose of this error terms? The purpose of the error terms is that if there is any discrepancy between the observed and the predicted, like what you are predicting and what is observed, that is to take care of that discrepancy. And you know that even if you are including several explanatory variables, still you will not be able to include all. And first of all, you cannot afford to include all, because you know number of variables should be less than the number of observations. Rather, number of variables number of observations, a number of variables at 5, at least 5 times more you should have a number of observations, but at least kind of things. So you cannot include as number of variables as you are interested, because you will not have no degree of freedom. So error terms take care of all the omitted values. So this is the purpose of the including the error terms in your model. So remember why we are adding the error terms. Now, so once we have specified the model, we try to collect the data according to the model. And then once we have collected the model, we try to estimate these parameters. And when we try to estimate these parameters, then now only we try to talk about principles of least squares, you talk of method of maximum likelihood or Bayesian estimators and blah, 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 all kind of methods of moments or methods of moments, methods of, so all those, like even one can guess about it, that guesstimates, but we generally try to have an objective method, so that for a given data set, if somebody is using, he should also get the same estimates what I am doing. So you are estimating these parameters, and how will you estimate it? You will estimate on the basis of the sample, and that's why you are collecting the data. So you are collecting the data, on the basis of that you are developing an estimate for this parameter. Now once you estimate for these parameters, you have got now estimates. So autosomal consumption is 20 and it's 0.6. So what does it mean? It simply means that every increase, 1 rupee increase in your income, 0.660 paisa you are spending on the consumption expenditures. This is what is known as regression regression coefficient. This is a kind of so average change in y per unit change in x, average change in y on an average, because all will not do this. So on an average. So this means simple explanation is that even if you have no income, 20 rupees you are going to spend on your consumption. Second thing is that apart from that, if you have an increase in your income by 1 rupee, 60 paisa will go to this on an average. So change in y, average change in y due to unit change in x is nothing but a regression coefficient. Now, having said that, you have estimated it. Now, whether this estimate is significant or not, and that's why you go for testing of hypothesis, that whether it has come by chance or it is really by a design. So you want to test the significance. So one simplest test is, like, suppose this itself is equivalent to 0, just come as a chance, or you can even test that it is different from 0.8, 0.6, anything and everything. So you go for testing the significance. So for estimation of these methods, I said you go for principles of least square, you minimize the method of moments or maximum likelihood method of estimation. All methods are being used for this. And then the estimates which you got, it should have certain property. It should be consistent, it should be unbiased, it should be efficient, and it should be sufficient. So these are the properties of the estimators. But in econometrics, consistency and sufficiency is inbuilt most of the times. Only what you are testing is it should be unbiased, and it should be efficient. Should be efficient means it should have a minimum value. And then once you have that, then you can give any value of xi within the range for which you have collected the data, like data range of the data. It's not like you collected the data from the poor people and you start trying to predict the rich people. So that's the kind of, you have to have a limitation, the kind of. So if you want to have all classes, your sample should include all type of observations. So for income is suppose increases by 100 rupees, what will be the, so this is how you are being used for prediction. So far, so good. Now, all is well?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Any questions so far?
No, sir. I don't have any questions.
So simple. No, so there is no questions. Too simple? Okay, no issue. Now, if you try to talk about the overview of a forecasting techniques, basically forecasting technique may be quantitative in nature, qualitative in nature, and unpredictable. Now, quantitative matlab, as usual, I said that there are numerical estimates of your information. So an information quantitative in nature. If suppose you have sufficient quantitative information is available. Now one is explanatory kind of things. Explanatory kind of things which you generally do in a regression analysis. Suppose you try to develop a relationship, you try to estimate how inflation, capital spending, imports, exports, or public policy, they are influencing the GNP. They are influencing the GNP. Just I'll hold for a minute, just a minute. Sorry. So, so basically, suppose if you want to understand that how these variables are influencing this grossness of product, naturally you would like to regress these variables with GNP, isn't it? So that's what is the usual regression analysis, and of course with the error terms which I have already announced. But suppose you do not have information on either on inflation, do not have information. So this is what is known as an explanatory type of relationship, and that's what I have explained for a two variables. This is what is a regression analysis approach. But suppose you simply understand if one of that historical patterns will continue in the future, some part of the historical patterns will continue in the future, then on the basis of that, if you would like to predict the futures, either like growth in export or import or anything, suppose in GNP. So
No, sir.
if you want to predict the GNP at the time t plus 1, it should be the function of GNP at the present time, GNP at the one lag, like suppose if you are trying to have in terms of year, so GNP of the last year, GNP of the last year, or quarter year, whatever it is, and the function. Here, you just look at it that these two equations are one or the same, but in the right hand side, here instead of having another variables like inflation, capitalization, they are the lag value of the same variable. They are the lag value of the same variable. That's why this is known as a regression, and this is known as a auto regression. We are regressing with itself. GNP of the next time period t plus 1 is being regressed with its present value as well as its first 1 lag or 2 lag or kind of. So you are regressing with itself. So that's why this is known as auto regression. Auto regression, isn't it? This is known as auto regression, AR model, auto regression. So when we are talking of quantitative model, you have two type of model. One is explanatory, when you try to add right hand side the explanatory variables which has an influence on GNP. Another is time series, where here I have only series of GNP. I do not have any other explanatory variable. Of course, in you can always use explanatory variables also in time series model, which will, but now I'm talking of univariate types. Univariate when we do not have any other information. I do not have any other information. I only have information on the GNP, or I have information on the price, or I have information on the import. I have only one other. So if that is the case, then GNP at this kind of things is being regressed over its previous value. So that is what is known as GNP at t minus 1 and all kind of. So this is a quantitative information or a sufficient information is available. Then another type of forecasting techniques are qualitative in nature. Qualitative in nature means where little or no quantitative information. We do not have any quantitative information on that, but sufficient qualitative knowledge is exists. So when we go for a medium term or long term policy formulation strategy, that time we do not have much of the quantitative value. Like suppose if you want to forecast how a large increase in the energy price will affect the energy used in agriculture, in those cases, we do not have much information on this. But hello.
Sir,
Earlier,
Sir?
what I was talking, whether you are able to hear?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir,
Yes,
we
sir.
are able to hear, but the voice was a bit less.
Oh, sorry,
sound
I have
echo
put
was
my headphone below.
It's
Anyway,
okay, sir.
and anyway, I'll repeat in one go. Sorry. Yeah. These are the problems sometimes when you do from your home. Okay, fine. What I'm saying that first category is quantitative models, where you have sufficient quantitative information is available. Sufficient quantitative information means you see, suppose if I want to explain the growth in GNP, then that can be you know that it is influenced by inflation, capital spending, import, export, and all kind of things. So you have explanatory variables, and that is a kind of an explanatory models. But if you talk of a univariate time series model, where you do not have anything other than that series, suppose you have only the price data, you have only the export data, you have only the GNP data, yearly data. So when GNP of the current is being influenced by its lag of this, lag can be anything, maybe monthly lag, maybe yearly lag, maybe quarterly lag, suppose it's a yearly data. So you are saying that next year GNP depends on this year GNP, 1 year back, 2 year back, and all kind of things. So here you are regressing on itself, auto-regressive type of things. And I'm saying another, of course, we will come to the detail on it. Another things we are saying is the qualitative type of things. So where you have little or no quantitative information, but sufficient qualitative knowledge is there. You are an expert of that area and all kind of things. So suppose if you are an expert of the energy and all kind of energy, and you like as an expert, you are trying to formulate a medium terms and long term strategy. You do not have much information because never ever energy price had got, like, if you have some idea in that, but you have got some kind of things in other sectors or even sometimes energy, like, but you may not be having a long information. Several times this kind of events would not have occurred. In that case, you try to do is a kind of a qualitative model. Another is unpredictable, like little or no information is available, like kind of an imagination. Suppose you want to predict the discovery of a new or a very cheap form of energy that produces no pollution, like, so how will it be? So these are the, like, so forecasting techniques, when we are talking of, either it will be quantitative nature or qualitative nature or unpredictable, but the whole training programs revolves around this time series. Of course, not only this auto-regressive form of this, we also have a kind of multi-equation time series model and all kind of things. This is what is being done. Now, when it comes to the time series, a time series is a collection of observations on quantitative characteristics of a phenomena observed sequentially in time. When I'm saying sequentially in time, means you can have a data daily, you can have a data weekly, you can have a data monthly. So a time series is a collection of observations on a quantitative characteristics of a phenomena observed sequentially in time. So remember, when we are talking of a time series, you can have hourly data, you can have a daily, you can have a weekly, monthly, quarterly. Remember, these are all discrete time series data, isn't it? It's not a continuous time series data. You have data of first day, second day, third day. But if you go for ECG test and all, they have a continuous data. I'm not talking of that data. I'm talking of discrete data sets. I'm talking of a discrete data sets. So, and you know that time series data is the, like, you get an example right from the economics to engineering, every field of things you will be getting the data. Now the assumptions is here is a basic assumptions of the time series data is that the assumptions of continuity. This means some of the past historical pattern will continue in the futures. Some of the historical pattern is continuing in the future. So it's a kind of an assumptions of continuity of the past pattern. And of course, there are some peculiar feature of the time series data. We'll talk about that. So the objective of time series is you try to discover the patterns in the historical data sets and extrapolate that pattern to the future. That's the basic things of it. If you just try to talk about the time series analysis and modeling, what we try to do is that we try to discover the pattern in the historical data. You have a historical data, you have a which has got in a quantitative nature, and you just try to extrapolate that pattern into the future. That's what you are doing. Whatever way you try to isolate the pattern, and then you try to extrapolate that pattern. So there are few things which is known as the features of the, one of the terms which you'll always be talking about is the non-stationarity, isn't it? Non-stationarity, simple. You see, if you try to plot any data sets, you see like it will be increasing or it will be decreasing. So whenever you try to have a time plot of any data sets, what happens? Either it will be an increasing trend, it will be a decreasing trend, and the third thing is that it can be horizontal. Now, when we say data is non-stationary, this means that the underlying data generating process, because like time series will be data will be generated by any process. They does not have a constant mean and oblique constant variance. If you do not have a constant mean, or if you do not have a constant variance, or if you do not have a constant mean and variance, this means you are having a non-stationary. What does it mean? It's simply, you see what you are trying to do. You have a data series, you want to predict for the futures. Now, if you want to predict the futures, then if mean is changing, suppose it is an increasing trend or it is a decreasing trend, how can you predict it? So you want to have a stationary series. You want to have a stationary series means you want that series should have a constant mean as well as variance. Fundamentals, mean and variance are a descriptives or a fundamentals. You want the fundamentals of the series should be constant. So if you predict it same mean and variance, add its trend, whatever trends you have or seasonality, you add it, and that's what is your prediction. So a stationarity of the data, it's as simple as that. Suppose if you have a data series of 100 observations, it simply says that if you divide 1 to 50 and 51 to 100, both part of the data series should have same mean, same variance. That's all. So if a series has got this, it may be mean is changing, variance is constant. Maybe mean is same, you have a horizontal series, but variance is, fluctuations is more. Sometimes less, sometimes more. So fluctuation is changing over time. So when you are having a time plot, point here is when you are having a time plot, one thing is that either mean is changing, it's like mean is changing, or you may be having mean may be same, but fluctuations like this is changing. Like you see the variations, variability is changing, like fluctuation is changing over time. So or both the cases. If that is the things, then you will have a kind of a non-stationary data. So in order to have prediction or all techniques which we are dealing with, ARIMA and ARCH and GARCH, what you are going to have is that you are going to have a constant mean as well as constant variance. Okay. Then another problems of the time series data is that you have limited quantity of data. Observed, like most of the times you have a limited, and if you have a limited data, you are not able to partition it like for training, testing, and all kind of things. And you have noise in the data. Sometimes when you are taking a moving average or you are smoothing it by taking the average or by taking a moving average, so some of the components are obscured into it. So last two slides for today. So one is that what is the characteristic features of agriculture? Why we are like we have an understanding of time series, but why time series of forecasting in agriculture is different from all other things? Why we say agriculture price forecasting is different from? First thing is that, you know, like any other manufacturing sectors, agriculture production is strongly depends on biological process. And then agriculture is greatly influenced by unpredictable random events, be it a drought, be it a floods, be it a disease, be it a pest attack. So agriculture product markets are different due to seasonality of the production, derived nature of their demand, you know, and then dependence of the what is the stock into it. Many a times, the cycle of this, then price elastic demand, supply function, and all other kind of things. So, and one important thing is that here leading indicators play a very important role. Like, what is the leading indicator? Leading indicator is that X is a leading indicator for Y if lag of X has some predictive information content for the series Y. So simple is that, you know, like if more area is shown for under a particular crop, naturally it is a leading indicator that production of that crop is going to be more. So there are few things, as I said. First thing is that it's a biological process. I said seasonality, derived natures, and all kind of things, stocks and all kind of things. Second thing is that it is much more influenced by unpredictable events. Like everything goes well, you have got a good area, you have got a good production. At the end, you have a hailstorms or you have a kind of cyclones or any such kind of things. And the one go, it will not. Those kind of things are not possible, or like is not like commonly occurring in the kind of a manufacturing sectors. So predicting those things are very simple, but here, then of course, leading indicators plays an important role. So lastly, what will be kind of a coverage for another 4 or 5 days when I'm coming to the lecture. So what we'll be going to do, we'll start with univariate analysis. Of course, we are not going to cover exponential smoothing. We do talk about the decomposition. We will not be covering the exponential smoothing. We consider it as a kind of a mathematical model, not modeling is involved, kind of a mechanical model. And of course, still it is being used in many of the industry. Reason being is that when you have a voluminous task, modeling may not be possible. So we will be starting with the ARIMA model, that is auto-regressive integrated moving average model, which is also known as a Box and Jenkins. We'll let you know that why it is known as. So it's a kind of a linear model. We will be talking of idea of nonlinear model. We will not be talking of bilinear model or threshold auto-regressive model, but we will be talking of arch and Garch model. But remember, there should not be any confusion, which I will again emphasize in the next class, that ARIMA model, when you are trying to estimate the, like you are trying to predict the price, and this arch and Garch model is, you are modeling the volatility, modeling the changes in the variance, fluctuations when you are trying to have. So these are the univariate which we will be talking of. Then we'll talk of a multivariate, when we will talk not of a vector ARIMA, but we'll talk of a vector auto-regressive models. I'll let you know like one. So it's a kind of a corresponding to the simultaneous equation model, because you know in economics mostly we try to rely more on the simultaneous equation model, because at least you get an idea that okay, GNP will be influenced by this. So if 1% increase in this. So but when you have only one series of GNP, you do not know that how. So this time series models is many a times termed as a black box. You know why, but you do not know what. Sorry, you know what will happen, whether the price will increase, how much it will be increased, what is the predicted price, but you do not know why it is increasing. So to answer this why, since they have corresponding to this simultaneous equation, they have developed vector auto-regressive. You have multi-equation model kind of things, which is a kind of reduced form of equation. We will talk of a multivariate Garch when we are talking of a multivariate. And then apart from a statistical model, in a near recent times, and of course not so recent, there are several computational intelligence techniques, maybe fuzzy logic, maybe fuzzy techniques, maybe support vector machine, all. But what we are going to talk of is a artificial neural networks. And then in the recent times, you may be talking about artificial intelligence and all kind of things. So a recurrent neural networks had been can be made more intelligent by adding a cell known as long short-term memory cells. So we will try to have a kind of modeling of LSTM cells also. So in fact, this is what is going to be the whole set of this is whole set of topics which I am going to cover, be it a univariate, be it a glimpse of multivariate. Of course, when we are talking of a VAR, we'll also be talking of a co-integrations and all kind of things. And then we'll talk of artificial neural networks, and we'll try to talk of decomposition techniques and LSTM all. So I will stop here for today's class, and tomorrow I'll start